After a summer of sequels, explosions, and action pictures, moviegoers will finally be treated to something a little different. A romance set in England is just one of the new releases this week.
I'm surprised you'd even acknowledge my existence, or any woman's for that matter, since you show us such small regard on the page.
You cut me, madam.
I only meant to scratch.
Two scholars fall for each other while researching the relationship between 19th century writers. Gwyneth Paltrow and Jeremy Northam star in Possession.
The poetry from the time yearned for something, reflected something unfulfilled, and maybe something that bordered on the sentimental and certainly the feeling side of human nature.
A German restaurateur falls for her new Italian sous chef in the romantic comedy Mostly Martha.
Celery, basil, cognac.
What brought it on? Well, you know, my obsession with food was one part of it, I think. But I love food, and I'd read a lot of books about chefs that I thought were fascinating because they're very strange, interesting people.
Was the man equal to the scribe?
Oh yes, he was very charming. And you know, after the meeting, he doubled me on his banana seat to Chuck E. Cheese, where we spent several glorious hours together frolicking in the ballroom.
Wendy Crewson does her best Mrs. Robinson imitation when she seduces a 20-year-old in Ann Wheeler's Suddenly Naked.
The best part about this part is the fact that she's not a mother or a wife. She kind of lives like a guy. A single guy. And, you know, we don't get to see that very often with women's roles.
What do you do if your film star walks off the set? Well, if you're washed-up filmmaker Al Pacino, you digitally create a new one called Simone.
You can't hide her forever. Simone appears only when I want her to appear.
Simone is part pixels and part flesh and blood, and we don't like to say which part is which.
Simone was helmed by director Andrew Niccol, the man behind the techno flicks Gattaca and The Truman Show.
They're always sort of 5 minutes into the future, but these things are relevant to us now. And I guess I'm interested in how humanity fits in with the new technology.
It was the fall of 1956. I flew out to Los Angeles to set up Evan Picone Boutiques. One afternoon, I decided to play hooky, sit by the pool and get some sun at the Beverly Hills Hotel.
And finally, the rise and fall of legendary Hollywood producer Robert Evans is revealed in The Kid Stays in the Picture.
This is no musical, this picture. This is no Disney flick. And it's not for the timid. Even Francis Coppola, the director whom I had hired over Paramount's objections and then personally fired 4 different times, came over to hug me.
Evans was responsible for such studio hits as Chinatown, The Godfather, and Love Story.
They're all, you know, terribly creative pictures, but Love Story caused more pregnancies around the world than any film in the history of cinema.
Look at me. Do I look like a fan of law enforcement?
I think a lot of the whitewashed heroes that we saw in the 80s, that we saw an abundance of in the 80s, is not something that the audience is gravitating towards now.
One race, 2G buy-in, winner takes all.
I think that there are films that are better left alone, and then there are films that warrant a franchise. I think that either intentionally or unintentionally, I will be avoiding the action hero title with my work. And the only way to really do it is with, you know, by the choices you make.
The teen picture Blue Crush managed to surf its way into the 3rd spot.
What's the matter?
There's a monster outside my room.
Signs continued to run circles around the competition as the thriller held on to 2nd.
I think it's time we tried something new.
And X marked the spot for week number 2 as the extreme spy adventure finished 1st and is closing in on $100 million.
Let's take this to the next level.
To say Robin Williams has taken his career in a new direction would be putting it mildly. Recently, the actor has played a crazy kid show host, a serial killer, and now a psychotic film clerk. Will his latest turn in 1-hour photo leave audiences in the dark? Find out what develops in this week's review.
I've been doing mini lab work for over 20 years now. I consider it an important job.
1-hour photo was a new American indie thriller starring Robin Williams as Cy the Photo Guy, who is a lab tech, a photo lab technician who develops an obsession with a young family, and he sort of ends up seeing himself as the sort of uncle. Of course, he's not their uncle, and some very bad things happen as he gets sort of more involved with the life of the family.
What have we got today?
2 rolls, and I think I've got one in here as well. And can I have 2 prints of each, please?
I think there's a bit of a Robin Williams backlash, and so he's done what he should do, which is find dramatic roles that make him sort of creepy and interesting to prove that he's a great actor. And he did that in Insomnia without any sort of makeup or tricks. He just played a really creepy guy with a great script. So Robin Williams was amazing in Insomnia. And he continues this with 1 Hour Photo.
You're a very lucky man, Mr. Yorkin.
I'm sorry?
You have a wonderful family. And if you don't mind my saying so, a very beautiful house, too.
But, I mean, there's no sense of fun or zip or humor to this.
Right.
It's very labored, very pretentious, very heavy-handed.
We've been doing our pictures for a long time.
You know, I almost feel like Uncle Si.
I do like it. I mean, I think it's worth seeing for the idea of a sort of American family and Robin Williams. So I would say, yeah, I'd say go see it.
You get sort of this sort of steady queasiness as it sort of as sort of Robin Williams' side, the photo guy, his breakdown becomes more apparent.
He probably has a girlfriend and a mommy and a daddy who love him.
I don't think he does.
When Richard Hollingshead patented the drive-in theater in 1933, I'm sure he had no idea of its cultural impact. Well, now, after a huge decline, this car convenience just may be on the comeback trail. Steve has more in this week's Backstage Pass.
So you got a big date, but you've done the dinner thing, and she probably doesn't want to go to a ball game. And although going to the movies sounds great, maybe you want to try something different. Well, why not take a trip back to the drive-in?
This is a bit of an oasis. It's the 50s.
It's back in fashion. So really, people are still coming out to the drive-ins like the old days.
On with the show. When drive-in theaters began popping up in the 30s, they quickly rose to a popular form of entertainment. In fact, most drive-ins were still making money when they began closing in the 70s.
It's more of a lack of supply, and the lack of supply is based on a lack of land.
All these drive-in owners were just basically getting out of the business and making more money on selling the land than actually operating the drive-in theater itself.
Nowadays, if you want to stay in the nighttime drive-in business, you have to get creative in the day, like they do at the docks.
Having the driving range during the day made it a lot more viable for the acreage that's necessary to have both businesses.
All right, so it's a tough industry, but what is it that's bringing people back to the drive-in?
It's mostly nostalgia. When you first drive in, you see the colors, even the old sign or whatever. You just go back in time.
We just want you to enjoy yourself.
They're trying to find ways to find simplicity and find a time when things were less complicated. And I think what we're selling here is your own personal sovereignty. You can smoke, you can fool around, you can talk. Whatever you want to do in the car, it's your car. And that's the magical part of the drive-in.
Screen 3 is sold out. What do you see the future of the entire drive-in theater industry?
It's difficult to predict. The demand is certainly there, and I think people love drive-in theaters. So if it's in our hands, there will be more urban drive-ins built.
So with the use of clever marketing and the resurgence of interest in drive-in theaters, it seems this once popular activity of the past may become a popular activity of the future. Now all I need is my car.
If you'd like to head down to the docks for a free show at the drive-in, please answer this question. Name a movie that features a scene in a drive-in. Fax or email us the answer with your address for a chance to win. Now it's time for us to close the curtain on another show. We'll catch you next time at the movies.
So with the use of clever marketing skills and the resurgence of popularity in drive-in theaters, it seems that this one So with the use of clever
wonderful time. Come back soon.
And nowadays, if you want to stay in the nighttime drive-in business, and nowadays, if you want to stay in the